Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. We could be closer to seeing a deal on raising the $31.4 trillion debt limit. The Republican-led House of Representatives working with the White House to find some common ground. This afternoon, Republicans and President Biden spoke on the issue, expressing a bit of optimism. NTD's Melina Wisecup is following this development and joins us from Capitol Hill. So, Melina, where do we stand right now on the debt ceiling negotiations?
So President Biden has appointed two top-level officials to work with Speaker McCarthy's staff to hash out the details of a debt ceiling deal. Those negotiators met last night shortly after the president met with those four congressional leaders. And as you mentioned, both the president and Speaker McCarthy held press conferences at the same time this morning where they both expressed optimism about avoiding a default, which essentially would mean the federal government would be unable to meet its financial obligations.
I'm optimistic of our ability to work together. Do we have obstacles? Yes, we have a big obstacle in the White House. But we're going to change the course of history.
We had a productive meeting yesterday. I'm confident that we'll get the agreement on the budget, that America will not default.
And the president cut his trip to Asia short to continue working on this debt ceiling deal. He insists that the negotiators are talking about the budget and that that's a separate conversation from the debt ceiling deal because he wants to be careful not to be seen as caving to congressional Republicans' demands. We heard from a couple of lawmakers today about this very issue, and here's what they told us.
And the White House changed its position and tune with respect to negotiating.
I know the president ultimately can pay the bills using the 14th Amendment, and so I think that it's really important for us to not cave.
But it's clear that House Republicans will have to give something. That House-passed bill, the one that cuts funding for Democrats' key priorities, will not be the final product. And we have seen a messaging change from Senate Leader Chuck Schumer. He once was calling for a clean debt increase without any spending measures attached, and now he's emphasizing the need for bipartisanship.
Bipartisanship was the key to averting default under President Trump. It has been the key to averting default under President Biden, and it will be the key to averting default before June 1st.
So here we are just 2 weeks away from that June 1st deadline, and both chambers will need to use floor time to pass that bill once it is agreed to. As for Speaker McCarthy, his challenge moving forward will be trying to get all Republican members in his conference to stick together on whatever agreement that his staffers in the White House come to, because he is working within such a slim majority over on the House side. So time is tight for all of this to come together. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Thank you for that, Melina. And joining us next to offer some perspective into the debt ceiling negotiations, we have Republican Congressman Brian Babin of Texas. Congressman Brian Babin, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you, Steve, as always.
Thank you, Congressman. With regard to the debt ceiling, President Biden cutting his international trip in Japan and then to Australia short to come back to the U.S. and negotiate with Republicans. Does this highlight just how serious this is, and where do you think we are right now?
I think it absolutely highlights how serious this is. We're on the cusp of a default. We're on the cusp of possibly shutting the government down. But I can tell you, Americans want a president to stay here and solve their nation's problems. And President Biden, quite frankly, has wasted and squandered nearly 3 months, refusing to negotiate with our conference, with the Republican conference. And now we're down really to where the rubber meets the road. We're 15 days down from defaulting on a debt. And so I think absolutely it's his responsibility to come to this negotiating table in all seriousness. And we've done our work. We have a plan. We haven't seen him do anything except say we want a clean debt ceiling and we want a new credit card so that we can max this out as quickly as we did the last one. We can no longer do that, with nearly a $32 trillion national debt that is really just mortgaging our children and grandchildren's future. And quite frankly, I think endangering our sovereignty and our solvency, because they run together here, and really putting our economy at an enormous risk. So yes, he needs to stay here and he needs to negotiate and get real serious about this.
Congressman, one of the talking points that we hear is that Republicans want to default. If you could clear the air on that, give your perspective. Do you guys want to default? And if you could kind of break down what your plan is and where you think it will ultimately take us.
I'll be glad to. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's the same old Democrat, cast stones when you live in a glass house. That we do not want to default. We want the credit of America to stay as strong as we possibly can. We've got to have a strong economy. We have to be able to have a national security is depending upon our ability to keep a good economy and supply chains open and being able to pay our bills. And he has not wanted to negotiate for all this period of time. When we look back historically, and all three, Biden, Schumer, and Ms. Pelosi have all engaged in negotiations in the past. And when Joe Biden took office in January, the House Democrats and his administration have now increased the 10-year spending trajectory by $10 trillion, that's with a T, by $10 trillion. And we know now that the Congressional Budget Office, which, by the way, Joe Biden has once touted as the gold standard, has confirmed that our House plan, the Limit, Save, and Grow Act of 2023, would save American taxpayers more than $4.5 trillion. This is the largest spending cut in the history of our country. We can no longer continue to spend money like drunk sailors. And my son was a sailor, and I say that in great respect to sailors in the Navy. We can no longer continue to spend this kind of money. We don't have a taxing problem here. We got a spending problem, and a big one. So we have to make sure that we do our job, and we have, and now we have a negotiating table that's got chairs filled on our side. The president needs to sit himself down and really let's start talking.
Texas Congressman Brian Babin, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Steve. God bless.
Two political candidates endorsed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis losing their political races this week. This comes as donors reportedly want the governor to change his media approach. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the latest on the 2024 presidential election.
On Tuesday, two political candidates endorsed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis lost their races. The first one was Kentucky's Republican gubernatorial primary. DeSantis-backed former UN Ambassador Kelly Craft lost against State Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who was backed by former President Trump.
I find myself saying for the first time tonight that I am honored to be the Republican nominee for governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
After his victory, Cameron commented on being endorsed by Trump, saying, "Let me just say the Trump culture of winning is alive and well in Kentucky." The other DeSantis-backed candidate lost in a mayor's race in Jacksonville, Florida. Democrat Donna Deegan defeated Republican Daniel Davis. DeSantis of the weekend said,
"We must reject the culture of losing that has infected our party in recent years."
In an interview with The Messenger, Trump responded, saying that Ron's not a winner because Ron without me wouldn't have won. This comes after a poll by Florida Atlantic University and Main Street Research shows that most Floridians would choose Trump over DeSantis for president. Among Florida Republicans, almost 70% say they support Trump in 2024. When choosing between candidates, around 60% say they'd back Trump over DeSantis, who got 30%. Meanwhile, multiple Republican donors reportedly want DeSantis to change his strategy in regards to the media. DeSantis, who hasn't formally announced his 2024 run yet, is mostly on conservative media outlets. The Hill reports that a Republican donor backing DeSantis for 2024 said that he needs to broaden his message so he can pull more people into his tent. And a key lawyer for Trump said Wednesday that he's leaving Trump's legal team. Timothy Parlator played a role in the Mar-a-Lago documents investigation. He said that my departure was a personal choice and does not reflect upon the case, as I believe strongly the Justice Department team is engaging in misconduct. He added that Trump's conduct was not criminal. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
The Supreme Court handing down a decision today on Second Amendment rights. The High Court refusing to block a ban on certain firearms, including AR-15 style rifles and AK-47 style rifles in Illinois. Gun rights advocates have asked for the ban to be placed on hold while lawsuits play out in lower courts. They argue that those courts have ignored last year's landmark Supreme Court ruling that expanded Second Amendment rights. Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, meanwhile, arguing that the types of firearms targeted by the state's prohibitions fell outside of the Second Amendment's protections for, quote, firearms that are commonly used for self-defense. Second Amendment advocates point out that Illinois already has some of the strictest gun laws in the country, yet continually has some of the nation's highest rate of gun crimes. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.